Before identifiers can be used, they must be declared. In early versions of C, all the declarations needed to be at the top of a block of code, but in versions since ANSI C, or C89, this restriction has been removed. It's now considered good practice to declare variables closest to where they're first used. Let's make a working copy of func.c, paste it here into the working project, and I'll open that up. I'm going to go ahead and comment out this include directive for now. We'll be using that later. And we'll go ahead and compile and run it. You can see it displays hello world, and then it calls this function, which prints this is the function. So in this case, we have declared and defined the function before it's used. We're using the function in main, and that's on line 11. And up here in line 5, the function is being declared and defined. If we move that definition down after the main function, and we go ahead and save this and compile it and run it, you'll see our compilation. I'm going to go ahead and press this button over here, which changes the console to show the compilation process. You see that there's warnings in here, and we can see those warnings also in these little exclamation markers. And so that's not really working as we expected it. It's kind of working by accident. But if we go ahead and declare this above here and say void func with a semicolon like that, that's just a declaration. It's not a definition. And we save this and compile it and run it. Now our warnings go away and everything is working as we expected it. So the declaration, even though the definition can be later, or the definition can be even in an external translation unit and linked later, that declaration needs to be before it's used. The same is true, of course, of variables. I can say int I equals 47 up here, and then I can come inside my printf, and I can just say I is %d, and put the I there. And that will work exactly as I expected it to. See down here it says I is 47. And if I were to move that to after main and try to compile and run it, we actually get an error. This is not just a warning because it doesn't even know what to do with the I. It's also common to declare it inside of the function. This main function here, I can save this and compile and run it, and that works just fine. And I can move both of these later in the function, even after the function call, and compile and run that. And that works as expected too. This is the thing that didn't used to be legal in C before C89. That would have had to have been at the top of the function. So oftentimes you'll see, just as a matter of tradition, a lot of declarations at the top of a function, and then those things are all used later on in the function. And that's really a throwback to the early days of C. And it's not really considered best practice anymore. Best practice is considered today to declare something just before you use it and perhaps set off that bit of code with some new lines like that. We'll go ahead and compile and run that, and we see that it works as expected. Another common paradigm is to have a for loop, and inside the for loop control, you have a variable that's just used for loop control. So you can say int I equals 0, I is less than 5, and then increment I, and then put this all in a block, and we can take this printf and we can put that inside the block, and now that'll happen 5 times. And so I'll compile and run that, and we see that I is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now here I've reused I because I had named my variable I up above there as well. And so this one is getting unused because I have one defined inside this other scope. So I'll get rid of that for now. This construct here of both defining and declaring the variable inside of those parentheses, that used to be illegal. You used to have to declare the variable outside like this, and then initialize it inside the loop construct like that. And we'll see that runs exactly as we expect it to. And so you'll often see that. But since C99, the second to latest standard, we've been able to do it this way, which is a lot cleaner. And as we've seen, our functions need to be declared as well. So here we have this void func at the top. It's often very common instead to put that inside a header file and include that using a preprocessor directive like this. So let's go ahead and copy and paste func.h from the chapter 3 folder and paste that into our working project. We'll go ahead and open that up. And you see in here we have that function declaration. And so by including it here, then it's actually included in the scope, because you remember that included file gets included in place. This entire include directive gets replaced with the contents of that file. We'll discuss later the distinction between these quote marks and these brackets when we talk about the preprocessor. But for now, know that everything that's inside of this file is actually getting included in this context. So when I save this and run it, our function call happens fine. We don't get the warnings, even though the function is defined down here. So inside the header file, we have the declaration, and inside the source file, we have the definition. That's an important distinction. So variables and functions must be declared before they can be used. They may be declared in header files, even defined in external source files that are compiled separately and linked later, but they must always be declared in scope before they're used. Now let's delete our working files and run clean to get set up for the next lesson.